Today is the 15th of January. I saw this yesterday. We are only 2 weeks into the new year, and already pit bulls have killed 2 people and have attacked 21 in attacks that made the news. And this is only within the United States and Canada, by the way. Who knows how many attacks have taken place in other countries, but let's just deal with the US and Canada right now. This website, the National Pit Bull Victim Awareness website, is an excellent educational website that I encourage you to check out. When you hear these asshats go on about how dogs that attack were abused or mistreated in some way, or that they were trained to attack, or they were not trained properly or something, they come up with these ridiculous excuses. Ask them, where's your evidence to back up this nonsense you are spouting? And it's just something that infuriates me. There's so much that makes me angry about dogs, but this is something that just drives me up the wall because they have no proof, no evidence to support these ridiculous claims. When you go to this website and you read through the reports, you'll see that in the majority of cases, the dogs were not provoked. And that's another thing. They'll say, oh, the people, they provoked the dogs. In most of the cases, these dogs were not provoked whatsoever. So 21 reports made the news. And I'm going to talk about each one of these. I'm going to touch upon them briefly just to highlight, like, this is going to be a snapshot into what you find on this website. You can go back through the years and read the hundreds, thousands of reports. And this is a snapshot that will show you that usually the dogs were not provoked at all, and there is absolutely no history of aggression, no evidence to suggest the dogs were mistreated at all. So how these people continue to insist that these dogs were mistreated, I have no clue. All they have is anecdotal evidence. Well, I've known 6 pit bulls in my life, and they were the sweetest dogs ever. Oh, look at my dog. Does my dog look vicious? Oh, look at my dog in a tutu. It never attacked anyone, huh? This is absolutely ridiculous. These people are totally irrational. It's like saying, well, no one in my family ever got injured by a drunk driver, so drunk driving isn't a problem. They are so short-sighted, they can't see beyond their noses. And because something hasn't happened to them personally, then they deny its existence. They think it can't be happening. It isn't happening because it never happened to them. This is so stupid. Anyways, so another thing I want to mention before we get into this is that these are the reported cases that made the news, right? I'm going to tell you that I have heard from so many people who all say the same thing that I have said, and that's that I have known many people who have been bitten by dogs. None of them reported it to authorities. I mean, even if they went to the hospital and got stitches or whatever, it didn't make the news, right? So who knows how many attacks have actually taken place, right? And that didn't make the news. So these are the ones that made the news. So let's just have a look at this first case here. So here we have a couple of kids walking down the street in a quiet neighborhood, minding their own goddamn business, which is usually how these things go down, when a dangerous pit bull, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, they're all dangerous, came running out of nowhere and attacked them. A couple of people stepped in. A young man who was trying to help was severely bitten, suffering several deep bite wounds on his hand and arm. He required surgery. There is no mention anywhere in this article of the dog being mistreated or abused or trained to be vicious or anything like that. So as far as we know, this could have been one of those sweet family dogs that showed no aggression for many years until one day it went berserk, and that's usually how it goes. By the way, the links to all of these impartial, unbiased news reports can be found on the National Pit Bull Victim Awareness website, which I will link you to in the description. So next we have an 11-month-old boy who was crawling towards his father who was in the bathroom when their 6-year-old pit bull / lab mix was also headed towards the bathroom, reached the door at the same time, and suddenly attacked the boy. Now, there's no evidence at all to suggest the boy provoked the dog or that the dog was somehow abused or mistreated or trained to be vicious or had a history of aggression. No evidence of this whatsoever. If you're going to make an assumption about this case, you can assume that this was, well, obviously we know it was a family dog You can assume that it had shown no aggression, because why would the father let it roam around the house freely around the baby otherwise? So, just again, same story. Next, we have a report of a toddler who was living with her mother and her grandfather. This dog belonged to her grandfather. The mother picked up her young girl when the dog suddenly jumped up and snatched the child from the mother's arms, and then started to maul the girl. The young girl was in surgery for many hours. She has a long road ahead of her. She's going to require many more operations. And this is what kills me. So a friend of the family was talking to reporters, and their first thought was to say, my friend just lost her dog, who she was totally devoted to. And then as an afterthought, and I don't even know what to say about the granddaughter, the concern is for the dog. Can you believe this? They say the dog was usually well behaved and that this behavior was out of character. Again, no evidence the dog was abused or mistreated or trained to be vicious. No evidence at all to suggest the dog was provoked. It wasn't provoked. Snatched the baby out of the mother's arms, for crying out loud. To think about the shit-eating dog before thinking about the child shows how crazy these dog worshippers are. But this next story is a real gem. There's a man who was walking to the store, cutting through an alley when two pit bulls began running at him. Again, not a provoked attack. This guy was minding his own business, as it usually goes. He said he put his hands to his face and one of the dogs latched onto his jacket and left hand. Officers said he had severe lacerations to his left hand. The owner of the pit bull, Tony, complete fucking nutcase, according to the victim, came out of his house and he said he began asking him why he hadn't run from the dogs. Here we go with victim blaming. Got a video coming up shortly about victim blaming. And again, I have a video planned. I'm going to talk about how these dog worshippers have so much in common with psychopaths. No empathy for the human. They have everything backwards. Their concern lies with the dog, and only with the dog. Mental. But again, no evidence in this case that the dogs were trained to be vicious, or that they were not sufficiently socialized or trained, or that they were mistreated or abused. Nothing. No evidence to suggest that, so you can't use that as an explanation here. As far as we know, these dogs were well loved, raised with love, raised in what these wackos call loving homes. But let me tell you, there's nothing loving about making a creature submit to you. There's nothing loving about yanking another creature around on a leash and controlling every single aspect of its life, from where it shits to when it pisses to what it eats, when it socializes, when it exercises. To have complete domination over another creature is not love. To mutilate a creature's reproductive organs against its will is not love. To deny a creature its natural instincts to behave the way nature intended it to behave is not love. I could just go on and on. To bring it into a vehicle with you and not restrain it is not love. To let it roam where, it could get hit by a vehicle, killed, attacked, shot by somebody, that's not love. But the point is, there is no evidence to suggest these dogs were not raised in what these nut jobs call loving homes. Next, we have a 4-month-old baby girl who was killed by the family dog in what they call an accident. There's no accident here, folks. No, they say the dog never appeared to be aggressive. No evidence of the dog being mistreated or abused or trained to be aggressive or anything like that. As far as we know, this was a very sweet family dog. Veterinarians say a young child should never be left alone with any pet, and under supervision, parents should make sure there's some kind of barrier between the two. I think the parents should be actually holding the infant, says a veterinarian. The infant should never be put down on the floor and let the pet come up and lick it or lay on it or lay next to it. This is the advice that is given by professionals, by veterinarians. Why? How is it these dog nuts continue to believe that we are talking about animals that are pure and innocent and loving. You can't leave them alone with your child for a second because they might kill your child. Why? Because children make high-pitched noises and movements that make them appear to be wounded prey animals. That's what triggers the dog's predatory instinct. As for the ridiculous recommendation for the parent to actually hold the infant, we just heard about a mother whose baby was snatched from her arms by the family pit bull. So what kind of stupid advice is this? If the dog wants to attack, nothing is going to stop it. But again, no history of aggression, no evidence to suggest this dog was mistreated or not raised properly. Next, we have a man who was walking down the street, minding his own business, as they usually do. This is almost always how it goes down. Just doing his own thing, when out of the blue, a yard shark broke loose from its collar and attacked the man for no reason. Once again, there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest the dog was mistreated or abused or neglected or trained to be vicious or anything these lunatics will use as an excuse to explain the attack. Next, we have a story of a woman who sicked her dog on a man. She was involved in a physical confrontation with some person. She was being violent with this person. So there was this physical altercation happening when she apparently gave commands to her dog to attack the man. Now, it's possible, because this woman is obviously a violent person, she might have taught her dog to be violent. She could have trained it to be vicious, although I don't find any confirmation of that. It's also possible the dog was protecting its owner, as these nut jobs like to say. You know, like they would just protect their owner, right? If they see their owner getting attacked. So it's possible the dog had no history of aggression. If anyone can find any evidence that the dog was trained to be vicious, I'd like to see that evidence. But as it stands, that evidence is lacking, at least from what I've seen. Next, we have a 7-year-old who was attacked by a blocky-headed mutant that was chained up in the neighbor's yard where he was playing with some other kids. He walked up to the large bully breed dog. He was able to pet the dog. And then, when he turned to walk away, the dog lunged and latched onto him. Apparently, the boy was warned of the dangers dogs pose, and they go on to say that even the nicest, best trained dog can snap if it is startled or whatever. How was this dog startled or provoked? The child was walking away from the dog when the dog lunged. Like, I can't even. Next, we have a mini schnauzer that was attacked by a dog. Who cares? But look, if you don't want to get attacked by a dog, don't own a dog, because your chance of being attacked is much greater if you walk around the neighborhood with a dog on a leash, because dogs often are aggressive towards other dogs. What happens often is that people's dogs are attacked by other dogs. They intervene, they try to break it up. The dog redirects its aggression, attacks them. So this just happens over and over and over again. And, another thing I want to say, these ridiculously expensive vet bills that result from these attacks, this is part of the reason why pet ownership, dog ownership is pushed, especially pit bull ownership, it's pushed on us because so many people are profiting off this carnage, this mayhem. It's making people a lot of money, the pharmaceutical industries. How much money is made in reconstructive surgery, veterinary bills, and medicines? It just goes on and on and on and on. Just fucking ridiculous. Next, we have a story of a couple of scumbags, typical pit bull nutters. There was a guy doing laundry in his apartment building when he was bitten in the face by a pit bull that was owned by other residents. The dog was not on a leash, didn't have a collar on. I mean, you're not even safe doing laundry in your goddamn apartment building. So the guy got injured. He told the police where the owners lived. The police went and asked about the dog. The owners denied having the dog. And anyway, They were arrested and charged with interference. It's just fucking scum. But again, no evidence whatsoever to suggest the dog was trained to be vicious or was neglected or abused or mistreated in any way. As far as we know, this was a very sweet, affectionate dog that had no history of aggression and didn't show any aggression for many years before it just somehow got out, because that's what pit bulls always do. They just get out somehow and attack people somehow out of the blue. Next, another off-leash, blocky-headed meat grinder attacked a woman who was, surprise, surprise, minding her own business. And again, no evidence the dog was mistreated or abused or trained to be vicious. Same story over and over and over again. How do these people continue to insist the dogs were not trained or they were mistreated? No evidence at all for that. Next, we have another story of a woman who had to pay an exorbitant amount of money to the veterinarian to patch up her small dog that was attacked by another toaster-headed, rattlesnake-eyed predator that somehow mysteriously broke free from its owner, like they mysteriously do all the time. And being the Einstein she is, she intervened, tried to break it up. Now she's off work, isn't able to use her right hand properly because she got so badly injured. And she was more worried about the dog than she was about herself. You might as well risk your life to save a cockroach. Next, we have this monstrosity with a hideous and unnaturally wide, flattened area between its eyes that is begging for a bullet, that thankfully did get shot and killed when it attacked a teenage boy who stepped in and tried to break up a fight that broke out when this monster got into a scrap with another pit bull in the house. And like a genius, this teenager intervened. Listen, people, if there are two dogs fighting, or two or more dogs, whatever, there's a dog fight going on, don't step in. Just back away. And getting involved and trying to break up the dogs is just you're putting your life in danger. Like, what is wrong with you? Anyways, they shot the dog. Again, no evidence to suggest the dog had a history of aggression. It attacked because it was redirecting its aggression. Like I talked about earlier, the dog could not get to the object it wanted to attack, which was the other dog. So it just redirected that aggression and attacked the boy who was, intervening. So the dog didn't attack because it was trained to be vicious or because it was neglected or because it was abused or anything like that. It attacked because it's a dog. It was just being a dog and doing what dogs do, acting on instinct. This is very natural for dogs to do this, and you can't train it or love it out of them. Next, we have another upstanding citizen, similar to that lady who sicked her dog on the guy she was fighting. This lowlife was involved in some domestic assault incident. The police were called to his residence, and he released his pit bull on the officers, which resulted in the animal being shot. It says that he was arrested on charges of ill treatment to animals. So I don't know the story. Like, did this guy actually train his dog to be vicious? And was he really mistreating his dog? Well, it's possible. Next, we have a case of pit bulls attacking a dog. In this case, the dogs had gotten into a lot of trouble previously. They were known to run at large. They were in trouble with animal control. It says here that the department records show that the male dog had been impounded 5 times before and the female 2 times after being found running loose. So they were the subject of repeated complaints to animal control before this attack took place. So my question is, why were they allowed to have their dogs? If animal control, if people complain even once to animal control about your dogs, you ought to have your dogs taken away from you. So I'm not blaming the owners in this case. I'm blaming the dogs, first of all, for being dogs, because that's what dogs do naturally. They roam and they want to attack things. attack other animals and attack people. That's just what comes naturally to them because of their genetics. But I'm blaming animal control because you need to control animals. And by making it impossible for people to own animals if they prove just once that they're not taking care of their animals properly. And I don't think there is such a thing as a responsible dog owner because dogs they're always escaping anyway. I'm getting really sick and tired of police officers getting in trouble for shooting dogs. I'm hearing more and more. I got to make a video about this. Apparently, Leedy Van Cavage, that fucking whack job at the head of the Best Friends Animal Society cult that I talked about in the Pitbull Lobby video I made, she's like handing out information packages to police officers suggesting that unless you're a dog lover, you should not be allowed to work as a police officer, comparing it to racism, like if you have cynophobia, if you're afraid of dogs, or if you simply don't like dogs, then you're on the same level as a racist and shouldn't be a police officer. This just makes my blood boil. Here we have a story of a police officer who shot his neighbor's dogs. Why? Because they were chasing his cattle and were about to attack him. What is he supposed to do? What are officers supposed to do, really, when they have an aggressive dog charging at them? Are they just supposed to stand there? Of course he shot the dogs. Anyone in their right mind would, to protect his property and to protect his life. And what have they done? Oh, they've collected a bunch of signatures. Oh, and they're protesting this evil man this poor girl who's lost her best friend, and she was so close to the dogs and they never left her side, and boo-hoo-hoo. All this trying to garner compassion for the daughter whose dogs are now killed. Where's the compassion for the guy who's frightened for his life? Right? Oh, it just burns me up. But again, no evidence to suggest these dogs were not raised properly or were not trained or socialized. No evidence of them being abused or mistreated. They got out like they always do. They mysteriously got off their leads, mysteriously escaped somehow, like they always do. Look, if you don't want the police shooting your dog, keep your dog contained and under control at all times. It is your fault those dogs got shot, right? They're just dogs being dogs. Dogs are unpredictable. Those dogs very well may never have shown aggression in the past, but they're unpredictable and they often succumb to their predatory instincts out of the blue when they get triggered. This is proven over and over and over and over again. I couldn't find a lot of details about this case. All I know is that a person was attacked by a loose pit bull and they sustained injuries and had to go to the hospital. Again, no evidence here to suggest the dog was somehow raised by a shitty owner. We don't know that. We don't know that the dog was abused or was not socialized properly or was mistreated or whatever. As far as we know, this dog was raised with so-called love and never had any aggression issues in the past. We don't know. Could have been the sweetest family dog for all we know. Next, we have an emergency medical services worker who was helping the victim of a pit bull attack when the pit bull that did the attacking on that person attacked them. So the police were looking for the dog when they say the dog spotted the EMS worker and attacked the EMS worker. Like, this is just so crazy, and I hear that this happens a lot. Like, first responders are often attacked by dogs, which is ridiculous. But again, no evidence to suggest the dog was not raised properly. No evidence to suggest it had crappy owners or was trained to be vicious or was abused or mistreated in the past. It was just being a dog. A father was sentenced to 8 months in jail for leaving his toddler in the care of his brother, who apparently is mentally disabled and was not monitoring the toddler at the time. of the attack. The dog attacked the toddler. We don't know what led to the attack. You know, these dog worshipping freaks are going to say the child provoked the dog. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. There's no evidence to suggest the dog was abused or mistreated. Am I repeating myself? I mean, how many times do I have to repeat this? But again, no evidence that this dog was not raised with love or mistreated or whatever. Could have been the sweetest family dog for all we know. Could have been the best dog for many years until it suddenly snapped like they all do because they're dogs. Now here is a fine example of the sociopathic nature of these dog-worshipping mental institution escapees. So a woman was walking her small dog when it was attacked by two pit bulls. Again, like a genius, she intervened, got injured, but the dogs were identified by a neighbor as belonging to her neighbor. Now, her neighbor denies it and says they're not his dogs because there's no aggressiveness in any of his two dogs. And said that, well, there's another dog that lives over there that's brown. It's got to be that dog. Denies responsibility. Now, he says he empathizes with the victim. Psychopaths will often say the right thing to make it look as though they are decent human beings if it serves them to lie. But they have no empathy for the victim, and they'll say whatever they have to. Now, I don't know for sure what happened here. Maybe he's really not at fault. So I don't know. But there is one thing I know for sure. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the dogs that attacked this dog and the owner were abused or mistreated or raised by shitty owners or whatever other ridiculous excuse dog worshippers will use to explain this attack. And finally, the last story I will talk about is this report of an anti-human, child-hating asshole with two pit bulls. And why do I call him that? Because everybody knows that unneutered or intact dogs are more likely to display aggression. This guy's dogs were not neutered. So he had two pit bulls that he described as very affectionate, said that they would lounge on the couch all day with his kids. Harmless dogs, right? His children somehow let them escape accidentally. They got out like they always do. And this is why I say it's impossible to be a responsible dog owner. No matter how responsible you try to be, dogs are going to get out somehow. Can you hold those kids responsible? Can you blame them? They're just kids. I mean, this shit happens all the time and it's going to keep happening until dog ownership is banned outright. But anyway, dogs got out. They saw an elderly lab that was tethered in someone's front yard. They went after it, and thank goodness it was a dog they went after and not a child or another person, because somebody, a human being, could have been killed here. But they attacked a dog, and surveillance footage showed a man kicking the dog in the face, one of the pit bulls in the face, after the dogs were pulled apart. The dog fight was over, but this dog was growling while looking at the lab. So a man kicked it in the face. And now police are recommending an animal abuse charge. I'm not sure what to think about this. What would happen if we were talking about human beings here? Let's say there was a fight between two humans, and after the humans were pulled apart, somebody kicked one of the people in the face because they were continuing to threaten and taunt the other person. Like, what would happen? Would they be charged with abuse or assault, whatever? Like, I don't know. I just don't know about that. But it says here that since the story reached Facebook, the owner of the lab and the man who kicked the pit bull have gotten numerous threats of violence against them. Well, I know for sure that if we were talking about a human being that got kicked in the face after a fight, nobody would give a shit. And there would be zero threats of violence against anyone because nobody would care. Which is crazy. You know, if it's a pea-brained, instinct-driven crotch sniffing, leg humping, vomit slurping beast with no empathy and no sense of guilt or remorse. You know, a sociopath, essentially. People lose their minds. But if it's a human being, no one cares. Which is crazy. I do know one thing, and you all know what I'm going to say, don't you? There's no evidence to suggest these dogs were abused or mistreated or trained to be vicious or neglected or, whatever. Sounds like they were great dogs, and they almost always are the most sweet family dogs until they surprise everyone by attacking out of the blue. And why do they do it? Because they are dogs. Because they have an inborn predatory instinct or instincts to redirect their aggression. I Hate Dogs made a great video, and I forget which one it is right now, but about dogs and all the different reasons they attack. It's all instinctual most of the time. And yet these loons continue to insist it's because the dogs were provoked. It's because the dogs didn't have good owners. It's all in how you raise them. These lies, these myths that people continue to perpetuate piss me off to no end. If you hear this nonsense, ask people, where's your evidence? What proof do you have? And if they come back with their anecdotal bullshit about how their dog never attacked anyone, the dogs they know have been the sweetest dogs, ask them, would you also say that because your grandmother smoked her entire life and never got cancer, that smoking doesn't cause cancer? Just because something hasn't happened to you or your friends, personally, you've never known anyone that's had this happen to them, it doesn't mean that it isn't happening to many other people every day. Dogs that were raised in loving homes by owners that loved them and took great care of them and considered them to be valued members of the family are surprised every day by their dog's sudden, unexpected, explosive aggression. Even after these dogs were the sweetest family dogs for many years, it's Russian roulette. Every pit bull is a ticking time bomb. Well, every dog is a ticking time bomb, but especially bully breeds that are born with genetic hyperarousal and a high prey drive, and the ability to inflict serious injury on a person because they were bred to be efficient killers. They're not all going to go off, but you never know which ones will. They're all ticking time bombs. Some will never go off, but you might just be the unlucky one. I'm leaving you with the link to the National Pitbull Victim Awareness website. Read through the reports and try to find even one that says the dogs were abused or the dogs were trained to be vicious or some other nonsense. They're really hard to find. Usually there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that. So I'm going to wrap this up now. Stay tuned. I have some ideas for some great videos. My next one's going to be about Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses that are on the rise. And like I said, I'm going to be making a video that's going to draw parallels between psychopaths and dog owners. That'll be another interesting one. So have a great week, guys. And remember, the future is dog-free.